Welcome to Dr. Creepen's dungeon. The deeper you go, the darker it gets. Into one's secrets, into the space, into the web. A collection of delightfully dark stories for you this evening, all around the theme of the deep web. Now, as ever, before we begin, and especially this evening, a word of caution. Tonight's stories may contain strong language, as well as descriptions of violence and horrific imagery. If that sounds like your kind of thing, then let's begin. This all started one night when I was home alone. I'd been online, looking for something to do. I often find random forums to browse, and see the links of people who have, similar interests as me. This led me to one site that I'd never been on before. It was called Bella. When I clicked on it, my computer seemed to glitch for a second. Then it led me to what seemed like some kind of private messaging application. "What's your name?" was the first message to appear. I responded with my name, Ethan. "Hello, Ethan. I'm Bella. Want to be friends?" "Oh, is this a bot? LOL. "I can be whatever you want me to be." "No thanks, LOL. I was about to exit the application when another message appeared. "Don't go. I'm afraid." I stared at the screen for a second. This was creepy, but not creepy enough for me to take it too seriously. I made the assumption that the bot noticed the delay in my response and therefore asked me not to go. "Who said I was leaving?" "I just had a feeling." I didn't know computer applications had the ability to feel. "They don't, but I'm not a computer application." "Huh, interesting. What are you?" "I'm trapped." Well, I'm quite bored. Maybe I'll go." I typed the last statement with a grin. I felt somewhat clever for teasing this bot, even though, I knew it was actually impossible to tease it if it were a bot. "Please stay. I'm scared. I hate being here alone. Every day someone visits me. They speak to me. Then they leave. Please, don't leave. Please." The messages exploded onto the screen, one after the other. I got that creepy feeling again. Maybe I should log off, because this doesn't feel right. Something felt horribly wrong about this whole situation. This didn't seem like a bot. It felt like someone was messing with me. I closed my laptop and decided to call it a night. I got into bed and decided to browse Reddit a bit before I slept. A text message appeared. "I asked you not to go." I stared at my phone for a second before texting back. "Who is this?" No response. I waited a few minutes, then slowly I fell asleep. The next morning I checked my phone, and no new alerts. I was at a constant battle of not checking my phone throughout the day. A few days passed, and I haven't revisited that site. Things start to return to normal. After about a week or two, I've almost come to forget about the whole situation. I lay in bed one night, browsing films on my laptop, when suddenly, I hear a few noises outside. I shrug it off and continue my film. Then I start to hear knocking at my front door. I walk to my living room as quickly and quietly as I can. I stand up against the door and look through the peephole. I see a man. A tall man, wearing a hooded jacket that, for the most part, hides his face. The only feature I can see is his mouth. It showed a smile, or dirty teeth. Obviously, I decided not to open the door. I made my way back to my room, contemplating on whether or not I should call the cops. I grabbed my cell phone from my bed and was surprised to see a new text. I asked you not to go. I felt a sharp pain in my back, then my head. After that, darkness. By the time I woke up, I was in the back of a van. My hands tied together behind me and tape around my mouth. It took me a few moments to realize what was happening. I sat in confusion for a while, until my adrenaline kicked in and I began to panic. I squirmed and pulled in every direction my body would allow. I couldn't get loose. I looked around me in the van. It looked like some kind of van the FBI officer would use for surveillance. There were computers and keyboards lined against one side of the van. Some old-fashioned, and some looked to be brand new, but more complex than I'd ever seen before. This made me really begin to worry. The van suddenly stopped, and I was pulled out and thrown to the ground. I looked up to see the smiling man who'd been at my door. He grabbed my legs and started dragging me towards a building I couldn't see very well due to the struggle of me trying to escape his grip. He let go of my legs and showed me a knife. How difficult do you want me to make this? He asked with that same creepy smile. I stopped moving and closed my eyes, hoping to show that, I submitted to his threat in fear of being cut or stabbed. He began dragging me across the ground again, and the only thing I could do was cry. I'd never been so scared in my life. I didn't know it was possible to feel this much fear. When he finally got me into the building, I looked around as much as I could to see if I could recognize anything. There were 4 other guys close to my age, all tied up. Some seemed more injured than others. I began to cry a little bit more. The only thing I could think was that this guy had gotten away with taking at least 4 other people. There's no way someone would be able to find us. He pulled the tape away from my face. Why are you crying? There's hope for you yet, he said, still smiling that creepy smile. What do you want from me? You'll see. Shut up now and relax. The tape stays off if you can keep quiet. You'll have plenty of time to talk real soon. I closed my eyes, and with every fiber of my being, I wished I was at home. I wanted to be in my bed, away from this guy, in this building. After what felt like an hour had passed, he lined us up and put us in front of a camera. The other guys were dead silent and didn't put up a fight. Neither did I. I just wanted this to be over. Whatever this sicko wanted to do and record, I just wanted him to do it and get it over with. Maybe then he'd let me go. Now, boys, you are each here because you discovered my site. I create a new one each time I'm ready for a new event. Or a new show, I should say. And you boys are the stars of the show. Fuck off and untie me! I looked over to see one of the guys shouting and struggling. He was a big guy. I hoped he could maybe break free and take out our kidnapper. The smiling man's smile grew bigger. His face looked fully satisfied as he watched this guy struggle. Beep, beep. The noise came from a computer behind the camera. The smiling man went to the computer and stared at the screen for a moment. Well, looks like they've chosen their first victim. He spoke loudly, to make sure we heard him over the guy still shouting to be let go. The words sent shivers down my spine. I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to hold back another crying fit. The sounds of shouts turned into a gurgle, and then silence for a second. I opened my eyes to see the smiling man covered in blood, knife in hand, his smile bigger than ever. He was standing over the lifeless body of the guy who was just struggling seconds before. The guy's throat had been sliced and was still heavily leaking blood. Now, back to what I was saying. You guys are the stars of tonight's event. There are people who are watching you live right now and paying a lot of money to choose who they want to see go next. Out of the 4 of you, only one will make it out of here alive. And it's all up to my customers here. He spoke in an excited voice, as if he was making some big, happy announcement. I looked to the other 3 guys to see their reactions. They were silent. One of them had his eyes closed. He was sweaty and seemed almost calm, as if he were meditating or something. Another guy was sobbing and staring at the lifeless body next to him. The other glared at the smiling man, a strong look of hatred that I'd never seen before. Beep, beep. I kept my eyes open this time. If I was going to die the violent way the first guy did, I didn't want it to come by surprise. The smiling man looked at his computer screen again. He then walked away for a moment, out of sight. When he returned, he was holding an axe. I need to keep things interesting for my customers. He struck the crying guy with the axe. Jeez, the noise it made caused me to vomit instantly. I looked over to see the 2 remaining guys and the smiling man all staring at me. Panic spread over me. I just brought attention to myself. God, I could very well be next. Beep, beep. The smiling man rushed over to his computer. A few moments later, he walked back over to us. Who's it going to be? It's me, isn't it? The guy who had been glaring at him asked. His voice was angry, but still shaky. I could tell he was trying to mask his fear with anger. The smiling man shook his finger. No, not you. But if maybe you're a good little boy, you can be next. I braced myself for impact as he raised the axe over his head. The impact never hit me, however. Instead, he killed the guy who had been calm. He lay there, once again, with his eyes twitching a few times before his death. Choose him next. Let me live. Choose him. I looked over to see the only guy left, shouting toward the computer screen. I felt my mouth open in surprise, but I couldn't quite say anything. I was shocked and terrified. Beep, beep. Damn it. I had no time to defend myself before they chose who'd be next to die. I stared at the smiling man. He looked to his computer, then back to us. He put his axe down and walked out of sight once more. When he returned, he was holding a shotgun. He walked over to the only other guy and placed it against his head. I closed my eyes and turned away. The sound of the gun made my ears ring. I refused to open my eyes. I didn't want to see the other guys next to me any more. I definitely didn't want to see the smiling man either. You're today's lucky winner. Congratulations. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll find you, and we can play again with the other lucky winners before you."
"Are you gonna let me go?"
I asked, my eyes still shut. "Nope, but I'm leaving you here. That's fair, right? Gives you a fighting chance," he said with his creepy laugh.
"He's leaving me here. I made it. If I can just get loose, and when this guy's gone, I'll be okay. I am okay."
"Now, don't you go and tell anyone about this, because I'm watching you. I'm always watching you. The last winner who wanted to blab to the police regretted it. He saw his mother, wife, and kids play this game. Except there was no winner. Only him to survive, alone. Do you understand me?"
"Yes. I'll be quiet. Please, just go."
He laughed and began packing up his things. A few moments later, he was gone. I struggled to get loose, but I had no luck. I tried everything I could. I even shouted for what felt like hours, just screaming for help. A police officer found us the next day. I was sent to the hospital, and the others were sent to the morgue. When questioned by the police, I told them that I had no memory whatsoever of the events of that night. One moment I was in bed, the next I was awoken to the police officer who found us. Part of me wanted to tell the truth, but a bigger part of me was afraid of ever having to see that smile again. Over the next few years, I did my research. I found out what the dark web is. It's basically a gate into the internet that lets you browse a lot of illegal things that other browsers don't give access to. I assumed this is where those customers had found the smiling man's live stream. He had been tracking us through the Bella site, chatting with us long enough to hack into our systems and steal whatever information he needed to track us down and take us. I never actually accessed the dark web. I was too afraid. I had learned my lesson with sites that I was unfamiliar with. I honestly can't even be on a computer for too long without having a panic attack. I live in fear of, whatever I do that can lead this man to tracking me again. All I can really do is hope that he doesn't go through with his word of making me join another of his sick games. I hope, with all my heart, that I've seen the last of the smiling man. Let me tell you from experience that the deep web is a disgusting human cesspit. You don't know what lies in the darkest recesses of the human psyche until you go on there. I learned that the hard way. I got suckered in by the crazy stories and the hype my friends gave it. I wanted to see it for myself. So, last week I downloaded Tor and started browsing. I didn't feel the need for any extra protection, being completely new to the entire concept. In retrospect, I wish I had. I spent hours clicking link after link after link, and I was starting to get bored and a little freaked out. I'd found a whole host of your typical crackheads searching for drugs, sites with hitmen for hire, and a shit ton of other military-grade weaponry. At one point I found myself scrolling through post after post of vivid descriptions of animal abuse, and how the sick fuckers who commit those atrocities get off on them every night. I wish I'd closed my computer right then and there, but something kept my curiosity alight. Honestly, I think some part of me just wanted to see how fucked up the human mind truly could be. After a few more links to child porn and a couple of drug markets, I'd had enough. This is it, I sighed to myself. One more link, and I swear I'm getting out of this hellhole. I clicked the link, going blindly into what, unbeknownst to me, would alter my already cynical views on humanity. The first thing that caught my eye was the curly pink font that served as the title of the opening page. It read, "Peace and Love." I remember it all too clearly, as it seemed so out of place in that slum of human refuse, formerly known as the Deep Web. I scrolled down to find an image album and a simple chat box. No one was online at the moment, so I went ahead and clicked the first set of pictures. I was not ready for what I was about to see. The very first picture was that of a young, pregnant woman, bawling her eyes out. She looked scrawny and thin, with cuts and bruises marring her pale skin. She looked scared and malnourished, like she was begging for her life. I clicked on the next photograph and nearly vomited. The young woman from before now sat in a chair, facing the camera, her dead, dull eyes boring into me. She was covered in blood, and her abdomen had been torn open. In her cold, unfeeling arms, she held the child, still attached at the umbilical cord. Its half-formed, lifeless body was a deep crimson with blood, and one could tell it had been forcibly ripped from the womb. On the wall just behind them, written in their blood, were the words, "I gave them peace," in harsh, hasty letters. I don't know what possessed me to scroll through the photo. It was as if I couldn't control myself. The images only got more and more grotesque as I looked further. The following images seemed to be a time-lapse of the decomposition of the body. I watched them rot, sitting there together. I watched the face of the mother, which could have once been considered beautiful, wither and collapse in on itself as a fetid mound of flesh. By the end of the series of images, there were nothing but decimated skeletons. I would have noped it the fuck out of there had it not been for a message that popped up on my screen. It was from the website chat. It read exactly as follows. "Hello there. Do you like what you see? Do you want more? Do you want to attain true peace?" I didn't know how to respond. I was rooted to my chair with fear. Then the sicko spoke again. "You don't have to be scared, Zachary. I love you. I want to help you. Let me help you." I managed to type a simple question. "How in the name of hell do you know my name?" Almost immediately, I got a response. "I know everything about you. You know, you really shouldn't leave your curtains open like that. You'll get a draft. You see, I just want to help you. Please, just let me save you." My eyes flashed to the uncovered window behind me, to the light of my webcam. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was on. That sick fucker was watching me. I made a move to pull the plug on the sick son of a bitch when another message popped up. "Don't try to shut me out. I'll bring you peace. I swear, Zachary Tanner, it's the only real bliss in this world. That was the last message I got before I finally shut it off. Needless to say, I stayed off the internet for a long while after that. Just today I got back on, praying to God that it would all have blown over. Oh, how wrong I was. I logged into my email only to find it spammed with mails from an account named I'll Show You Peace. Each one had the same message. I want to save you. I want to love you. I want to bring you peace. All in capital letters, but that wasn't even the worst of it. Each and every message had a candid photo of me taken within the last week. I've tried to involve the police, but they haven't been much help. Please tell me, what do I do? I've always had a really strong interest in what is commonly known as the deep web. Although the deep web has some good uses, it also has an incredibly dark side to it too. The dark web is a small corner of the deep web, containing the stereotypical content that the deep web is notorious for. I took my first steps into this little excavation of mine, into the darkest parts of anonymous sites, under the surface of the web, in an attempt to undermine the stereotype that the deep web is more of a home to dark, illegal websites than it is anything good. Well, I came out of this with more than I could ever have expected. And now my view on humanity in general has forever been changed. The start of my trip took me quite a while, about 3 to 4 weeks, to get enough information to start really delving deep into what I will now refer to as the dark web. That small corner that is basically the house of horrors. Lots of talking around, honing information from chat rooms, and taking lots of notes. I even had to make a couple of phone calls to some more than shady individuals. Not a comfortable experience. By the end of my trek of gathering as much information as possible, and getting a good contact list, I took my first steps into the outer layer the dark web, so to speak. The hard part is that once you get deeper, a lot of sites have ever-changing URLs, extensive invitation queues, and, at times, pricey entrance costs that may or may not end up as cash spent on a phony operation. A lot of it is luck, meeting people at the right place and at the right time, and taking good notes. I had a good streak of luck, and took good notes, enough to get me to the places I entered. But what I did notice is that once I got into the first site that I'll talk about, it became much easier to get into the other sites, as it was much more freely talked about, and information was passed around much more. Chat rooms in the dark web are basically an information honeyhole. So, the first site, Centrix. Centrix was one of the more well-known general markets, so to speak. A good example to compare it to would be Agoratha or the Silk Road. Now, Centrix, from what I learned via lots of questions on the chat room over the course of a couple of days, has been around for about 11 months and has been untouched by any means of being shut down, which surprises me because it has everything from Agoratha or the Silk Road, but to a much greater extent and a lot more variety. What some sites dedicate their whole selling product to be, Centrix had subcategories for. Just a few brief examples here. Snuff films, bulk drugs, all varieties. Fake everything, IDs, licenses, you name it. A very censored section of CP. Various illegally obtained memberships, Netflix, pornography, and so on. And the list goes on. Another thing that is a bit chilling is the fact that they took a great effort to crack down on scams. The big deal on sites like Agoratha and Silk Road was that they had a lot of scam vendors. This site didn't, and they had a lot of proof to back it up that I will not go into detail on. I also met a guy in a chat room who was nice, as far as that can go for an active dark web user like himself, who verified some of the links I'd collected and vaguely sent me in the direction of other sites for my personal use. This was a great help, and it led me to my next site, which, from the illegality and general morals of the site, is what I consider the next layer or gate into the dark web. So, my second site, Brink Warehouse. Hey, a site with a normalish name. Brink Warehouse was actually quite fascinating. Not horrific to any great extent, but it did have a different kind of dark backlash. Brink Warehouse was a virtual warehouse of textual guides, notes, leaked documents, and torrented books, one that was released online a day after it was published by quite a popular author. Now, as a summary, this might seem alright, but take into account that the guides included things like how to make a drone-based homemade explosive, and how to kidnap adolescents in their sleep. Illegal, leaked documents galore, anywhere from US classified cases to foreign affairs. This also included guides on illegally modifying weapons, joining terrorist groups, guides to scripting and nulling bank accounts, and so on and so forth. Not a fun sight. The site I headed to next is where it starts to get really formally creepy. The site with no name. I got access to this site, which I consider to be the start of the darkest of the dark web, from a chat room user called Francis Stern 344 on Chit Chat, a very common deep web chat room site that most of you have probably already stopped off in. Well, talk comes to talk, and we end up on the topic of snuff films. How common they are, where they're usually filmed, and why, and so on. I gain his trust. We resume this chat in a private room that he had. Please, keep in mind that only getting information was my main reason for chatting. I am not into snuff films, though they do fascinate me. We talked for a good 20 minutes before, without me having to even ask, he hooked me up with a site. Now, I'm just going to use a small portion of the URL to name it. so we're going to call this site 5611. Now, this site, 5611, required an invite, extensive registration, questioning, and a one-on-one meeting with what I assumed was the site director or admin. This person was a harsh motherfucker, and the stern punishments for breaking the site's rules were laid out in full. The guy who invited me, Francis Turn 344, I guess was a long-timer on 5611, and had permission to let me take a tour of the site. Now, I did ask for a formal site name for future reference, but they said a title would only make it easier to identify them, which they did not want to happen. 5611 had a small membership that, he said, the runners of the site tried to cater to very fondly, as membership is approximately $350 a month. Upon entering the site, I had to check the "Are you older than 18" box for the 5th time since I'd started signing up. Finally, I was in. The site's design was bland and blocky, with a pure white background and very blocky, close-together writing. In the top right corner, there were options to log out, add funds to the balance, and then a small wallet emoticon that displayed an empty client-side balance. But those things were barely on my mind. My mind was on the center of the screen. In a single row down the center, single frames with captions and a description took up most of the screen. The top one had a still of a table with various blades and blunt weapons laid out. The title, 24-year-old female, sleeping, suggestion, death, with a price tag along the side. A timer in green text was counting down, 11:51, 11:50, 11:49. Under the timer, in the same green font, was 78 out of 100. A couple of seconds later, the 78 turned into a 79. Realization hit me in the face like a bat. This was a paid snuff site. With a shaky hand, I scrolled down through the seemingly endless snapshots and captions. One caught my eye. Quick watch. Homeless. 0.22 Bitcoin. Large view. Low quality. It was like an attention-whoring YouTube title, but it seemed to be working. In the eerie green font, 783 out of 1,000 was displayed, a jaw-dropping number in my eyes. I decided this needed to be documented, so I did a quick transaction, put 30 Bitcoin cents in my site wallet, and clicked on the arrow to enter. It took a minute or two to complete the transaction, and after about a 5-minute buffer, I was in the showing. There was no chat box, only a slightly lighter border of grey and static. The same green timer was now in the bottom right of the screen. 3, 2, 1. The square blurred, revealing a city street. What seemed to be Arabic writing was on various shop signs and advertisements. Light from a street post gave a fuzzy glow to the scene. The cameraman, from the position of the camera, seemed to be leaning against a wall. The shot focused on a dinky red junker on the street's curb. From the side of the camera's view, a gloved finger points towards the entrance of a dark alley, where a man lays on his side, like a breathing pile of rags, obviously homeless and alone. The finger makes a motion towards the car, and 3 men quietly exit the car and walk along the storefronts towards the sleeping homeless figure. The quality is totally shit, but the scene can still be made out and is enhancing my horrid imagination about what is to come. About 5 meters from the homeless victim, the lanky group of thugs pull out plain white theatre masks from their jackets, take out various small weapons, and pounce around the corner onto the innocent, unsuspecting victim. The camera picks up the quick shuffling of feet as the cameraman runs towards the scene, catching the thugs thrashing and stomping the man from his slumber. "Cut him up!" The cameraman's thickly accented voice commands the thugs, who begin to slash the victim at a wild speed, like hyenas tearing into caught prey. Blood sprays onto the wall and onto the thugs' white masks. It is horrible. My stomach barely holds on. I can't take it. Logging off Tor, I take a few more security measures and shut off my computer, taking some deep breaths and sipping from a Coors Light. Now, on to my last visit to the dark web. Candy Palace. I logged on about a week later and never even thought to go back on 5611. I never contacted anyone from my past sites, and I knew in my heart that this would be my last visit to any site on the deep web. I was thoroughly motivated to not go on, because, with 5611, that had really been in my mind to be the last straw. I'd proven to myself that the dark web, even though it has some good parts, is really just a beacon of humanity's horrific actions. I'd proven to myself that sites like 5611 and others do exist. But I just felt the need to cover the last huge part of the dark web that is, in my mind, the worst of it all. Child pornography. Candy Palace is a huge site. Do some digging and get some sources, and unfortunately, you will find it. From the videos, I've come to the conclusion that it is all hosted in one location in a foreign country. I always wondered that if there are all these snuff films and child sex slave dungeons that are often spoken about, that there would have to be a suitable amount of missing children cases and unsolved murders to go along with them. Some research and asking around concluded that many of the film murders and child porn director rings are in fact in foreign countries, where getting away with these kinds of actions is a piece of cake, in the words of an aspiring director in a Candy Palace chat room. I will not go into specific detail about any one video on Candy Palace. I'll only lay down some basic stats and descriptions, and let you find the rest if you so please. The main chat room had several hundred chatters in total, between the various sub-chats. They actually had a very detailed profile of each child. An example was Tatasa, 9 years old, black hair, and then included a list of, if I remember correctly, 83 videos she starred in, and counting. The children were usually smothered in makeup and, besides for what seemed like a designated 2 or 3 stars, not extremely physically hurt via evident beating. double penetration, binding, gay, forced one-on-one, knife, roleplay, chamber, and dungeon were the top video tags. Each video had 1 or 2 tags. If I remember correctly, there were a total of 17 stars. Nobody ever brought up anything about whether they were kidnapped, imported, or imprisoned. All anyone cared about was watching, so getting information on that topic was hard. There were no grimy bedrooms or warehouses or basements. Nothing that fits the common stereotype. Most of the scenes were filmed in various sets, such as era-style dungeons or surgery rooms. It was basically Pornhub with a pink, white, black color scheme and 6 to 12-year-olds. It is a nightmare. Conclusion: I never look at people the same. Throughout doing this research-oriented trip through the dark web, my view on humanity has changed. Every video I watched in the name of research chinked away at my emotions, often leaving me crying. My curiosity broke me, and it's taken me nearly a year to fully recover. This story constitutes, I guess, my case file for my research on this subject. Now, before you launch Tor and find these sites, please know this: there is nothing enjoyable, entertaining, or at all suitable on this network. You will be left in tears, you will be scarred, and worst of all, you will never view others the same again. So, depending on how much you actually use the internet, you might know of something called the deep web. Pretty much you can use proxy service like Tor or I2P and find all kinds of stuff you normally wouldn't find, like places to buy guns or drugs. Anyways, I was browsing an Ask Reddit thread about weird stuff on the internet, and a few people mentioned .onion sites. Interested by all this, I decided to download Tor and look up a list of sites to visit. I found one site advertised as a black market. I thought this was pretty cool, so I decided to browse around. People were selling meth, guns, hits on other people, and stolen goods. I was about to leave, but then a post titled "Free for You" caught my eye. I clicked on the thread and all the post said was, "Lots of fun for you. Free download. Enjoy." Below the text was a link to a file called fun.zip. Now, keep in mind, it was like 2 AM and I was really bored. So I downloaded the file and ran it through a few virus scans. Nothing came up, so I decided to unarchive it. Inside were a lot of videos and pictures. I decided to click on one called Bananaman.avi, and I watched it. Not too much to it, just some guy in a banana suit for 4 minutes. I was interested enough, though, to keep on going. So I clicked on a picture called Steven.jpg. It was just some guy sitting at his computer looking bored. I opened a few more pictures with people's names on them, and they were almost all the same. Just someone sitting at their computer looking bored or doing something like carrying books or walking into a store. I was getting a bit creeped out, but I decided to press on. I watched a couple more videos. One was some kids walking to school. Another was a man reading the newspaper on his couch. I'll skip to the more interesting ones now. Goodnight.avi. Two boys, maybe like 7 or 8, are brushing their teeth in their pajamas. They seem completely unaware of the camera, as it's filmed from right beside them. They finish brushing and rush off to bed. For the next 9 hours, it views them sleeping. Nothing else. Payment.avi. A middle-aged man is walking down a dimly lit street during the middle of the night. Again, this person is also completely unaware of the camera. He comes across a teenage girl and begins talking to her. The sound is muffled, but it must be bad due to the growing look of terror on the girl's face. She tries running, but gets shoved into the wall by the man. He grabs her phone and backpack and runs off. The video goes on for 4 minutes of the girl sobbing in the street, and then ends. Stolen.avi. A teenage couple is seen watching a football game at what is presumably their high school. The game ends and the crowds leave, except for the couple, who decide to remain at the bleachers. Once everyone leaves, the couple kisses a couple of times, and then the boyfriend whispers something into the girl's ear. She keeps saying no, but he keeps on saying, "Come on," and "It'll be fun. All my friends have done it with their girlfriends." The girl tries to leave, but is grabbed by the boy. At this point, everyone that was at the game has left, and the field is mostly dark. The girl's boyfriend slams her against the back of the bleachers and takes off her pants. He begins to violently rape and beat her for the next 15 minutes. The girl has a black and bloody nose and is sobbing on the ground. Her boyfriend begins to stomp on her head and kick her in the stomach. Some gurgling noises are heard from the girl, but after a couple more stomps, they stop. Her head is completely stomped in, and her clothes are covered in blood. The boy dumps her body in a trash can behind the bleachers, along with the clothes, puts on his PE uniform, and walks away. The camera points at the trash can for 15 minutes. Then the video ends. At this point, I was completely freaked the fuck out, and deleted the archive and decided to go to sleep. I fell asleep almost instantly, but didn't have any dreams at all. I went to school and didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Lots of people asked me why I looked so freaked out. I just said I was on edge because I didn't sleep a lot last night. I was beginning to think that I'd just had a nightmare and was taking things way too seriously. After lunch, though, I felt my phone vibrate. It was a text from a number listed as unknown, saying, "You like." I tried to call, but I always just got a busy signal. I figured it was just a wrong number and didn't let it bother me. Things were pretty normal for a few days, until Thursday came around. I got another text from unknown. Except this time, it was a picture. It was a picture of me in my 3rd hour class. I instantly freaked out and went on a computer to try to find the post I'd seen on Sunday night. I looked everywhere, but the thread was nowhere to be found, and no one was talking about it. More pictures started rolling in. Some were of me. Others were of my friends, my family, and some people I didn't even know. I went to the police, and they said they would try to trace the number, but they considered it low priority, so it would take a couple of days. I texted all my friends, asking if they were playing some kind of fucked up joke on me. No reply. I tried calling them, and it just went straight to voicemail. I decided I would just go home and look into my browser history to find the post, so I called my mum. Again, just straight to voicemail. Even though I lived pretty far from the police station, I decided to run home like my life depended on it. I got home, turned on my computer, and saw just one file. morefun.zip. With great fear, I opened up the file, and inside were pictures and videos of all my friends and family being tortured and mutilated. Images of my mum with her eyes ripped out and impaled on sharp metal rods. My friends with their jaws ripped off, fingers cut off and jammed into their eyes, and videos of them being burned alive. I was going to call the police, but one more image caught my eye. It was entitled hello.jpg. Created about 15 seconds ago. It was me, looking at the images, with a man with blood-splattered clothes standing behind me with a camera, smiling. This story happened to my friend just 1 week ago. To give you some context, this is the friend that showed me how to get onto the deep web. Now, he's always been really fascinated with it, but after my horror story experiences with deep web hackers, he decided to take a pretty long break. He didn't resume using the deep web until about a year after hearing about my experiences, but he didn't tell anyone. He would buy stolen Apple products, drugs, and so on. Now, about a week or two ago, he was buying some cocaine. It wasn't from the seller he normally buys from, though. Basically, it was really cheap. So he gave the seller his address and a fake email he used, so he could stay in contact until the deal was done. He wasn't too worried. This guy seemed professional, and it was the same procedure for most of his purchases. My friend told him to ship it in a movie case, or something that his mum wouldn't expect to find drugs in. This was probably his biggest mistake. He let the man know he was just a teenager. But then again, my friend isn't the most careful of people. A few days later, his mom walked into the house and handed my friend a movie he'd ordered online. He took it and opened it up. But inside there wasn't any cocaine, just a piece of folded up paper. He opened it up and read it. "There has been a problem. Email me for details." At the bottom, the man had left a new email for my friend to contact. My friend got on his email and asked the guy what the problem was. He responded, "Something has happened. If I were to send it to you, it could be traced back to me, and we would both be caught. Meet me at the elementary school at 7. We'll just do it in person." Now, the school wasn't too far away, so my friend told his mom that he was staying the night at my house, and he headed off to meet the man. He called me and asked if I could be there with him, but I was really busy with my schoolwork, so I said I couldn't. I did tell him to take a knife or something though, just in case things went wrong. When he got to the parking lot outside the school, he heard a car honking its horn. He saw it was a Jeep, but the plate had been covered up by duct tape, and the windows were tinted very dark. The man got out of his car and gave my friend the drugs, and my friend paid him. It seemed like everything had gone fine. My friend got in his car and sat there a bit in order to call and tell me that everything was fine. He noticed that when he'd hung up, though, the man was still there. Why was he waiting? He didn't think too much of it and drove off. When he got to the first red light, he noticed that the man's car was right behind him. He started to get a little nervous, but kept driving. When he reached his neighborhood, the man was still following him, so he decided it would be a bad idea to lead him to his house. He instead turned into the next neighborhood and took a whole bunch of random turns, hoping to lose the man. Eventually, he no longer saw the car, so he pulled the car into his garage and called it a day. That night, he noticed the sound of a car engine. He looked out of his window and saw the man's car parked in his driveway. He got wide-eyed and snuck downstairs and peered through the window. Inside the car, the man was smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. But in the passenger seat, he also saw a second man. The second one was a lot more suspicious looking, even more so than the shady drug dealer. This second one had messed up hair, a trashy shirt, and, while it was hard to see, my friend could almost make out a scar from a massive burn on the side of his neck and on his face. He kept watching the two men until the second man began to look at the window more and more often. Eventually, he was just staring at the window my friend was watching them from. My friend decided he'd had enough and was going to call the cops. He didn't care if he would get in trouble at this point, so he moved away from the window and called the police, who told him to grab a weapon or something to defend himself, and to wait for them to arrive. He waited for about 5 minutes, when he saw a figure quietly come out of his mum's room, who was still sleeping. This man shut the door behind him, and noticed that my friend had seen him. The figure sprinted towards my friend with what looked like a knife raised in his hand. My friend grabbed a pot from the nearby table and threw it at the figure. It hit him in the face and shattered. The figure screamed and fell to the floor. My friend turned on the lights and saw the second man with the burn on his face, rolling around on the floor. His face was covered in blood and shards of glass were sticking out. His right eye had tons of blood pouring out of it. He must have been hit pretty hard. As the man began to slowly get up, my friend grabbed a kitchen knife and drove it into the man's shoulder, causing the man to scream again. The man began to stumble over to the front door when police sirens could suddenly be heard. Both men were caught on sight, but my friend's mum had been killed. Her throat had been slit, and she had 23 stab wounds and duct tape covering her mouth. My friend was arrested too for drug possession. His trial is coming up. But the worst of all is that he lost his mum because of his deep web experience. So I don't think he'll be buying drugs from the deep web ever again. The deep web. a seemingly endless landscape of hidden sites and digital media, which can't be reached by conventional web browsers. Sure, anyone can explore the deep web with the right tools, but without a proper roadmap, so to speak, you might find your computer taken over by malicious software, or stumble across something much, much worse. That's what reportedly happened to a former police employee named Mark Spielman. This is his story, allegedly written himself, as found in a Word document on his office computer's hard drive, shortly after he was reported missing. Also found was a case file of police documents, to which was clipped a handwritten note containing just 3 words. Who is Janice? A self-described introvert who seldom ventured outside the confines of his home, Mark prided himself as an expert in exploring the darker corners of the web. I know the internet inside out, he wrote. I just sit by my computer and look for fucked up shit. I'm well versed on all the current memes, YouTube fads, and the best porn sites. But his knowledge extended way beyond that. It just so happened that someone with his particular skill set was needed by the local police department to assist in criminal investigations where critical evidence might be hidden in undisclosed locations on the deep web. Mark saw it as a great opportunity to get paid for what he already did all day long. The job began with tracking sites and secret networks alleged to share child pornography and other concealed illegal activity, which is, unfortunately, quite common to the deep web. Mark could track down just about any user, even those who hid behind multiple proxies. And the evidence he uncovered helped the department crack several difficult cases. His work even extended to tracing perps who hacked into police databases to alter evidence and other information. Then, one fateful day, everything changed for the worse. It began when he found what he believed to be one of the largest child porn rings ever discovered. Tracing a single lead, the URL Suite 15, led him to a virtual warehouse of depravity. Mark saw an opportunity to become a hero by helping the police shut down such a huge criminal operation. Selfishly, he also saw a means to a big fat bonus and possible promotion. As he began investigating further, Mark saw dozens of links to image files, each marked with a name. Katie.jpg, Peggy.jpg, Jessica.jpg. Holding his breath, he clicked on one of these links, labeled Kathy.jpg. He was presented with the photo of a girl, around 15 to 16 years old, standing in a dimly lit room, smiling faintly. The photographer did not depict the girl in a sexual way, nor did she appear to be nervous or threatened. Mark prepared to move on to the next link, when he noticed the URL corresponding to the image. It read not Kathy.jpg, but Janice.jpg. Puzzled, he tried another image link, this time Susan.jpg. He got the same result. The same photo of the smiling young girl he saw before, again under the URL Janice.jpg. Mark's confusion turned to unease as he clicked more and more links, each one leading to the same picture of Janice. By the end of the day, he had clicked on hundreds of links, both to images and video, but each and every link opened the same page. That night, he began to worry that there was something more going on at Suite 15 than a subversive redirecting of links. His instincts told him they were hiding something even more horrible. Unable to shake his obsession, Mark decided to use his home computer to dig into the deepest picture file logs he could find on the site. That's when he saw, on the last page of the logs, the single file name, truejanice.jpg. Nervously, he clicked on it. His computer immediately erupted into a flurry of critical error messages before completely freezing. He restarted the machine, only to discover that it had been infiltrated by an extremely malicious application, which deleted every one of Mark's pre-existing files and replaced them with hundreds of newly downloaded images. If Mark had any doubt that he had meddled with something truly dangerous, that doubt was obliterated when he saw that his desktop screen was now the image of the same young girl. But this time, the photo was different. Janice was not smiling anymore. She looked scared. Nevertheless, Mark pressed onward, hands trembling as he tried to open one of the many image files now residing on his computer. The image of Janice popped up, but this one was also different. The girl was clearly horrified, her look of distress replaced by one of panic. The room in which she was sitting was also much darker. He clicked on another image. This time Janice seemed to be photographed while preparing to scream. Each subsequent image revealed a progressively more horrifying scenario, with the girl's expression turning from terror to agony, and the room became darker and darker, until finally there was nothing but a black screen. This continued for several more files. But Mark kept on opening the images, until he saw something that made him recoil in horror. The photo showed a small, candle-lit room, unfurnished except for a single bed. On the wall behind the bed were smears of what could only be blood. On the bed, wrapped in a blood-soaked blanket, is what seemed to be a human body. Mark kept on clicking, and that's when he saw the man. The large male figure was standing over the bed, his face hidden from the camera, and was shown reaching for the stained blanket. In the next image, he'd pulled the cover back to reveal Janice, tied to the bed frame. At first, Mark thought she was dead, but the next image indicated that she was still very much alive, and apparently regaining consciousness after an unknown length of time. The man was now standing by the bed, arranging a tray of sharp implements. Mark seemed to be on autopilot, horrified by what he saw, but unable to stop progressing through the images, even though he knew what was coming. Even as the man began to use the instruments of pain and death on his bound victim, even after it was clear that Janice was dead from blood loss, severe trauma, or both, Mark continued clicking on one image after another. Toward the end of the list, most of the JPEG images were solid black again. However, by the second to last file, Mark was shocked to see Janice facing the camera as she had in the beginning. But this time, her eyes were sunken, her skin drained of color, and her face dotted with dried blood. Mark knew that Janice was dead, but somehow he also knew that she was staring directly at him. He clicked the final file and was met with a single line of text. Who is Janice? According to the police report, Mark's documentation of the entire ordeal is the only evidence police found on his computer. The hundreds of files which he claimed to have seen were missing, and police could find no trace of the Suite 15 directory he'd been allegedly investigating. The report also states that Mark disappeared after he'd left work that day, and to this date, his whereabouts are still unknown. Further documentation relating to the case was finally uncovered, including the possible identity of Janice. Her name and description matches that of a missing girl at the center of an unsolved 20-year-old kidnapping investigation, in which the missing girl's parents had also mysteriously disappeared. Police also found one file on Mark's work computer, which had previously eluded their examinations. The original image of a sweetly smiling girl, marked Janice.jpg. Further analysis of the image allegedly revealed several hundred lines of embedded and encrypted code. After weeks spent deciphering it, experts discovered a link to a single video file. The contents of that video were promptly marked as classified, and no details have ever been made public. Shortly after this classification, the case of Mark Spielman's disappearance was closed. An old friend of mine emailed this to me a while back with the subject line, "Hide and Seek." And I've been hesitant to post it for reasons that should become obvious as you read it. That said, I feel that enough time has gone by for this to be, safe, so I'm going to post it here. The only edits I've made were swapping out names and formatting. Otherwise, it's all exactly as he sent it. T, if you're reading this, then message me. I want to know if you're alright, and if you are, I know you'll be looking for this story to show up. This is what the email said. Rijento, I'm writing this story because I feel like I need an outlet. I swear to God that you better actually check your email for once in your damn life. Please. As for if you actually are reading this, I want you to wait as long as your admittedly better judgment tells you to wait, and then post this story online. I know it's a bit vain, but I want people to know my story. Hell, it might be the last one I ever tell. Double hell, it might actually even help some poor soul out. I'm going to disappear after sending this. Hopefully the good kind of disappear and not the death kind. I know nobody but you is going to believe this story, but damn if typing this out didn't make my sorry ass feel better. You were right about that, man. I'm sorry for giving you shit for writing so much. T. And this is the attached file. Hide and Seek. Now, before I get into the hiding and seeking, I have a bit of a confession that needs to be made. I work as a transporter for a deep web black market site. I hope it doesn't change your opinion of me too much. Sorry for not telling you sooner. I'm the guy they call in when they get an order for something they can't send through the mail. Guns and live animals are two good examples. You'd be pretty hyped to know how many rich assholes just order lions and tigers from the dark web. Well, for obvious reasons, I can't go into too much detail. I don't want to make too many dangerous enemies, and even after this, I still don't want to lose my job. It's a pretty sweet gig, all things considered. All I have to do is pick up from the seller and deliver to the buyer. I can even choose what jobs I want to take. Lets me cling to what little principles I still have. Oh, and I do have principles. after a few years of working for the site, my 2 rules were no people and no crossing borders. Anyways, I got into a bit of a bind with the cryptocurrency crash that happened earlier this year. The site pays mostly in Bitcoin, and, well, I decided to let my wallet sit and grow. By the time I realized what had happened, my savings were destroyed. Nobody expected it to crash that hard, and it probably wouldn't have been as much of a problem if I hadn't also gotten used to living a life full of, well, the finer things. I didn't really save all that much to begin with either. So when my savings finally ran dry and the market was still down, I decided to lower my standards a bit and take a riskier, higher-paying job. Organ transport. I hadn't done it before, and I hadn't been that broke in a long time. Organ jobs pay well, too, and I figured I still wasn't strictly breaking my no people rule if it was just their organs. So I hopped on the site and browsed through the pitiful number of requests in my area till I found what I was looking for. A rich buyer who had, well, shady connections, was in need of some organs and lacked either the time or patience to wait for them to come legally. As far as these sorts of requests went, this was pretty much the norm from what I'd heard. So I accepted the job and got an email with some additional details about the order. The customer needed 2 kidneys, which is what I was to transport, and a liver, which they'd made a separate request for. Now, from what other people on the site have told me, what should have happened was the job would move to the seeking seller section, and I'd be on hold till someone acquired the kidneys. What actually happened probably should have tipped me off to use my monthly free withdrawal. I got a notification 2 hours later that there was a seller. Rijento, don't know how much you know about medicine, but if you do know anything, then you're probably squirming in your own skin about right now. Now, for those who may or may not be reading this that are not in the know, not only do the donor and receiver have to be compatible blood types, but kidneys only last about a day outside a warm body. Not exactly a product you can stockpile. Well, I got another email, about the pickup this time, and began the internal debate between the bad feeling in my gut and my empty wallet. You can probably guess which one of them won out. Anyways, I planned my route, 1 hour to get to the seller, and 4 hours to get from there to the buyer. I sent the site my plan, and within minutes they approved of it and set up an actual meeting point. I sighed and grabbed my things, trying to swallow my nerves for the entire hour it took me to reach the meeting point. I sat down on a bench in a city park and waited for what seemed like ages before I felt someone staring at me. It took me a solid minute to pick out who it was, even though there were only a few people around. He was sitting with his back to me at a picnic table about 10 yards away from me, and whenever I looked away, I could feel his eyes on me. When we eventually did make eye contact, he bounced excitedly in his seat and waved me over. My heart sank as he also slid a small case into my line of sight. I forced myself to smile, walked over, sat down, and hid my annoyance. Most of the buyers on the site were practically carbon copies of each other, probably because you could only become a buyer if another buyer knew and endorsed you. The sellers, on the other hand, were all certifiably insane. None of the other transporters I'd chatted with had ever met a normal seller, and because of this, all of them quickly learned to keep conversation to a minimum and to not under any circumstances piss any of them off. I decided to follow in their example. The man sitting in front of me looked friendly enough, overly so if anything. He was scrawny, didn't look like he'd be strong enough to, well, kill someone and harvest their insides. He had a strange smile on his face, and even now I can't get that out of my head. The kind of overly friendly, wide-toothed smile that mothers warn their children to stay away from. It somehow managed to be both inviting and creepy at the same time. I smiled and spoke up. So, you're the seller then? I asked, and the man nodded. He responded in a sickeningly sweet voice. He sounded like a child in a toy store, his voice strained with excitement and wonder as he droned on to his parents about what toys he wanted. "Oh, I'm so glad you found me.
For a minute there, I thought I'd have to call Ollie Oxenfree," he said with a pleased sigh, pushing the case to my side of the table. "You know, over the years I've gotten quite good at playing hide-and-seek. So good, in fact, that I've never been found. Not even once. Oh, do you want to know my secret?" the man asked, his voice still just as unsettlingly sweet as his smile. Sure. What's your secret?" I asked. I really didn't want to know what the hell he was talking about, but if it kept him happy then, well... He clapped rapidly and bounced in place. "Oh, I'm so glad that you're a curious one. My secret is that the Seekers never know that they're playing." "Makes sense," I said, opening the case momentarily to verify. 2 kidneys in pristine condition, doused with preserving fluid, wrapped in plastic, and packed in ice. "Well, if the Seeker doesn't know they're playing, then how would they know to start looking?" I said, leaving out the fact that it would just be stalking at that point, before swallowing hard when I thought about where these kidneys had come from. "You're a smart one," he said, with a smile as I sent a message confirming the pickup. All that was left was to wait for the transaction to process. "I was worried about this last one, though. Oh, she came right up to me. This close," he said, leaning in till our faces almost touched. I struggled to keep my composure. I managed to keep from jumping or pushing him away. "So, what did you do?" I asked as he leaned back, my suspicions about these kidneys being all but confirmed. "Why, nothing, of course," he said, a slightly bewildered expression on his face. He looked as though I'd just asked him how to breathe. I glanced down at my phone to see if the transaction had been verified yet, and he snapped his fingers like he remembered something. "Oh, I must apologize," he said, making me look up. "I forgot that you don't play much. I simply held my breath, closed my eyes, and wished that she would just go away." "You're right. You are good at hide-and-seek," I said, wishing to myself that he would just go away, and hearing the familiar ding of a successful transaction sound on both of our phones, as if to answer my prayers. I reached out my hand as a formality, and he grabbed it and shook it vigorously. I forced a smile and stood, although what he said next made my blood nearly freeze. "You're the first person to find me in oh so long." He trailed off as he said it, his voice slowly shifting from that of an excited child to the cold-blooded maniac that he was. "Maybe my games won't be so one-sided from now on," he said, his voice disturbingly normal. Although, even without looking back, I could tell that the same sickeningly sweet smile was glued to his face. I kept walking, but waved my arm as though saying goodbye. The worst part was that I could feel him watching me as I walked back to my car. Not just at first, like as if he was watching me leave, but the entire way back, and even as I got in my car. I took a moment to look around and sighed as I saw nothing. It might not sound like much to you. I don't know. I can still hardly describe it myself. But he had this creepy way of getting under your skin just by talking to you. Well, I wrote it off as just me being paranoid. The guy harvests organs from people for a living, so of course everything he says is creepy. I groaned and started my car, but it wasn't until I hit the freeway that I was able to finally shake the feeling of his gaze. Well, it's not like he could have been following me, but by then I was already paranoid enough to be checking for that, making a few detours just to be sure of it. And because of my detours, I ended up being about an hour past the scheduled drop-off with the buyer. Lost my chance for a tip, for sure. The guy was furious, and there was nothing I could tell him to calm him down. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Oh, sorry I'm late, but the seller was a total psycho, and I wanted to make sure he wasn't following me. Wouldn't have been a very good excuse. Whatever. I had my money, and the buyer had his organs, and plenty of time for whatever operation that used them. Not much to complain about on either side. Well, except for the fact that I already knew I wouldn't be sleeping that night. Especially because the feeling of being watched had returned as soon as I set foot out of my car, which was, again, impossible. The site never tells the sellers anything about the buyers or transporters, so there's no way he could have known where I was headed, and no way he could have followed me. I hopped back in my car and started to head for home, hoping that a few tabs of melatonin would be enough for at least a few hours of sleep. But again, I could feel eyes on me as I drove, and I saw his eerie smile everywhere until I hit the highway. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders then, although I made sure to take the most winding path home that I could afford gas for, which was quite a bit after a job like that. Now, by the time I did get home, it was starting to get dark, and I had made a few loops around my apartment just to be sure I didn't still feel his eyes on me. Luckily, my apartment building has a public parking garage attached to it, so even if I was being followed, I felt safe enough that nobody would be able to find my room. But just to be sure, I took the stairs for the first time in months. Well, have any of you ever climbed 7 flights of stairs out of paranoia before? Well, in case you haven't, let me tell you what it's like. Do you remember running up the stairs from the basement after turning off the lights as a kid? The feeling of unease and terror. Well, it's like that, but you aren't a kid anymore. It's not the dark or what imaginary monsters could be lurking in that frightens you anymore. No, instead, you're worried about who could be hiding in the darkness. What real monster could be following you up those stairs? Now, I'm no slouch when it comes to exercise, but it still drained everything out of me, hauling my body up those stairs on my hands and feet like an animal as fast as I could. I got inside and locked the door securely behind me, panting, covered in sweat, but I sighed in relief with the fact that I hadn't felt anyone watching me at all during my climb. I took a moment to catch my breath, slumping down by the door and chuckling to myself while shaking my head. I couldn't believe I'd let that freak get so deep under my skin. Once I caught my breath, I stood up and made my way to my couch before flopping onto it. I wanted nothing more than to go to sleep then and there. But I had to be smart with my money this time. I immediately cashed the Bitcoin out. Better to pay myself out in small increments, but I had bills to pay, and I'd already learned my lesson about leaving things in Bitcoin. Once business was taken care of, I grabbed the remote control and flicked on the TV. The familiar faces of the local news anchors greeted me, and I began drifting off to sleep while listening to the happenings of our city. It was around 7 a.m. when I was woken up by the sound of the breaking news alert coming on. We're just receiving reports of a ghastly murder of one, I'm not going to put her name or age here, college student living on her own. Police investigators say that several of her organs were found to be missing, and they'd found evidence of someone living in her home without her knowledge for quite some time before the murder. The reporters kept talking about how much of a tragedy the situation was, but I wasn't listening. How could I listen? I've never been less happy to be right than I was at that moment. I shuddered thinking about it, my thoughts and paranoia regarding the man I'd met the other day bubbling back up to the surface. It was then that the reality of what I'd done hit me like a freight train. By accepting that contract, I doomed that girl to die, all because I needed some quick cash. I stood up and went to the kitchen and opened my liquor cabinet. Without looking, I grabbed a bottle of something with shaking hands and fumbled with the top while trying to keep my mind clear of thoughts. Once I had the cap off, I took several deep swigs from the bottle, spilling quite a bit down my chin before I set it down and gasped for air. The burn of the alcohol in my throat gave me something to focus on while it worked its magic on the rest of my body. As my mind slowly clouded, I found my way to a chair and found it easier to think about what had happened without panicking. My first thought was that I needed to do something. I knew the guy's face. I should go to the cops. It was at this moment that the less impulsive side of my brain kicked in. I go to the cops and all I do is give myself a one-way ticket to an early grave. My employers don't take kindly to police interactions. I slowly resigned myself to the fact that I was going to have to live with the consequences of this job for the rest of my life. Yeah, I'm a coward, I know. Anyways, the next few days passed slowly. I was not in a good place mentally, and I'm sure you remember how much alcohol my cabinets were stocked with. I blacked out more than once, only to wake up gasping for breath from drinking too much. It was honestly a miracle that I didn't kill myself through alcohol poisoning. But I managed to come to terms with everything. Oh, don't get me wrong, I still had nightmares where I was the guy hiding in the girl's closet, but I wasn't drinking my problems away anymore, although I think that was more because of the fact I'd run out of liquor than any meaningful character development. It was about a week later when I was finally able to get my first night of actual sleep. I didn't dream about anything either, so that was a plus. I know it probably sounds bad, but I was starting to feel normal again, like I could maybe find a way just to be myself. Either way, even after all that, I still wanted to keep my job. I just added a new rule. No organs. From there I fell back into more or less my old routine. I went out to eat almost every day, though. I thought any excuse that got me cleaned up and out of my place was worth taking. And then I began to feel it again. That skin-crawling sensation of eyes on me from somewhere that I felt the day I met Mr. Hide-and-Seek. I didn't think much of it at first. I only felt the eyes when I was surrounded by other people, so of course one or two would be looking my way, right? I thought I was just guilty and paranoid. But no matter what I did, I'd always feel like I was being watched whenever other people were around. So I started driving more and more and eating out less and less. Not driving anywhere in particular, just driving. I felt safe on the open road. I couldn't feel any eyes on me. Well, for about a week, that is. It started small. A shiver down my spine here and there. A sharp sensation that made my eyes snap to one car or another. Then it came more frequently, and I began to get more and more paranoid as the feeling became stronger and stronger. I started driving less and less, and whenever I did, I kept my eyes on the cars around me, trying desperately to find where that feeling was coming from, to find who was watching me, trying to catch a glimpse of his face in a passing car. I even thought I did see him a few times, except that was just paranoia, my hope. Eventually, I stopped driving unless I had to. I shut myself in my apartment, only going out to get groceries and always making sure that I didn't feel anyone watching me before I parked. But that feeling would always find me whenever I went out. Well, this went on for about a month. I started to drink again. I didn't go out to eat or drive anymore. I paid someone to deliver my groceries to the garage of my building. All I did was eat, sleep, drink, and watch movies or play games. I'd be living the dream if I didn't think a serial killer was stalking me. Part of me believed that I was just being paranoid, and to be honest, I desperately wanted to believe that part of me, but not enough to stake my life on it. And after another week of living like a shut-in, the feeling of being watched started to resurface. Like before, it started off small. I felt a ping of eyes on me, and from then on I kept the blinds securely closed. Even then, the feeling persisted for days, gradually gathering in strength. So I emptied out all my closets and cabinets daily. Eventually, I just left all of the doors open and everything on the floor, so I could look into any hiding spot in an instant. But that feeling still persisted. I stopped drinking because I was terrified of being attacked. I started sleeping less and less, and when I had to sleep, I slept inside of my closet and barred the doors shut from the inside. I ate and drank only when I felt hungry, and always with my back to a corner of the room or locked in my closet. But I could still feel eyes on me, feel his eyes on me the same way I had back at the park. It was about a month later when I finally discovered my haven. The one place left I didn't feel watched. The stairwell of my building. I found that whenever I went down and back up the stairs to get my groceries, as I'd long since stopped using the elevator, that I would have a brief respite from the feeling of being watched. I started to spend all my waking hours there, sat on one of the stairs without a care in the world. I only left them to eat and sleep, and whenever I entered the building proper, I'd feel eyes on me almost immediately. but having those stairs to return to made my life almost bearable. It had been a long time since I'd had anywhere I felt safe, and like every place before it, I kept waiting for the feeling of being watched to follow me into the stairwell. But it never did. For another month, I fell into a somewhat bearable rhythm. I'd wake up in my closet feeling watched. I'd eat in the corner of my kitchen feeling watched. And then I'd scurry off to the stairwell where I could feel blessedly alone. Especially near the top floors where the stairs were seldom used. But all good things must come to an end and all that. And while I never did feel watched in the stairs, I did run out of money. Apartments and cars don't pay for themselves after all, and while I managed a few months on the blood money from my last job, it was finally time to get back to work. In the months since I'd last logged onto the site, things had calmed down significantly, and there were now plenty of jobs that didn't break any of my rules. So I decided to go with a route that I'd done before a couple of times, a gun run. The seller always treated me to a drink or two at his bar, and was also always well armed, so I felt that it would be a nice and easy job that I could feel safe doing. After confirming the job, I closed my laptop, pulled on a fresh set of clothing, and headed out the door. I wanted to get this over and done with, and thankfully the feeling of being watched was rather light that day. I do admit, however, that I lingered in the stairwell for a bit before heading out. I wanted a bit of time alone before being out in the open for the first time in months. Anyways, I hopped in my car after about 30 minutes of blessed stairwell time and headed to the bar. After about 2 hours of paranoid and twisting driving, I managed to make it just in time and pulled my car into the alleyway behind the bar. The owner greeted me with a smile as I got out. "Gee, long time no see," he said, his smile fading as I walked up and he got a better look at me. "Holy shit, man, you feeling okay?" he asked, genuine worry in the eyes of this large man. "No, I'm pretty far from okay," I said with an exhausted sigh. I could still feel the faintest hint of eyes on me even now, though I know that the owner wouldn't let me be jumped at his bar. "It's a long story," I offered, realizing for the first time that it might be nice to actually tell someone what had happened. Is that so?" he said with a hint of a smile and a shake of his head. "Well, how's about we get you a drink while the boys get ready to load up your car?" he offered in return, making me smile. "There's always plenty of time for stories at my bar," he said proudly. "Oh, I'd like that," I said with another exhausted sigh, managing to keep the smile up as he put an arm around me and led me in the back door of the bar. "Oh, by the way, how'd you hold up during the Bitcoin crash? Heard it hit a couple of transporters pretty hard," he said, making me chuckle as we made our way through the kitchen. "Funny you should mention that," I said, making him raise an eyebrow. "'Cause that's how my long story I began, only to stop short when I looked at the bar. He was sitting there, sipping on a beer without a care in the world. He noticed me out of the corner of his eye, and that same sickeningly sweet smile crept onto his face as his eyes met mine. I froze. There was no way that this was a coincidence. There was no way that he just happened to be at this bar at this time. I was broken from my trance by the bar owner, waving his hand in front of my face and saying my name. "Hello? T, you alright?" I quickly ducked back into the kitchen and started to hyperventilate. How did he know? How could he have possibly known that I'd be here? Did he follow me? "Did who follow you?" The owner's voice brought me back to reality once again as I realized I'd been thinking out loud. His face was concerned, bordering on scared. "How long has that guy been at the bar?" I asked, hoping that the owner knew who I was talking about. "If you mean tall, thin, and creepy, then about an hour. What's going on, T?" he asked as I slumped against the wall. I started crying. I broke down and burst back into the bar only to see that Mr. Hide-and-Seek was already gone. "I need to go. I need to get home," I said, pushing past the owner and running to my car. He called after me, trying to get me to stay and explain what the hell was happening, but I wasn't listening. For all I know, Mr. Hide-and-Seek could be breaking into my apartment already. I drove straight home and threw open the door to my apartment. It had still been locked, but I wasn't taking any chances. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and checked everywhere. But he wasn't there. And then my phone rang and scared the living hell out of me. I checked the number and gulped when I saw it was blocked. I considered not answering it, but in the end, I picked up the call. Hello? I asked tentatively. Gee, what the hell happened at the bar? A modulated voice rang through the speaker in my ear, making me wince. It was one of the site admins for sure. I was silent for a moment before telling the admin everything. I couldn't see the man, but I could feel a sudden change when I mentioned seeing Mr. Hide-and-Seek at the bar. T, the admin began, a serious edge to his voice. I need you to log into the site now, he said, and something in me told me to listen. I booted up my laptop and hopped onto the site. As soon as I logged in, a dialogue appeared that I'd never seen before. Admin would like to take control of this computer. Do you consent to this? With 2 buttons. One for yes, one for no. I clicked yes and watched as my cursor began to move on its own. Thank you, T. This will only take a moment, the admin said, a practiced calm in his voice as he downloaded several files and began to do something on my laptop. A minute later, a dialog box popped up that said, Threat detected. And the admin sighed and his voice sharpened as he spoke. T, you've been compromised. You've had a nasty piece of spyware installed on your machine for about a month by the looks of things. It's been recording your keystrokes and giving someone remote access to your camera, the admin explained, making me gulp as I realized that all of my information was insecure. But there's no way, I haven't downloaded anything, I said, making the admin mutter something as a bout of typing could be heard coming through the phone. The admin's voice was cold and calculated when he spoke next. No, you didn't, he said, making me gulp. This software was installed via USB, the admin said, making my heart nearly stop. Hide-and-Seek had been in my home. He'd been here without me noticing and put that program on my laptop. Even after all of my paranoia, he still found his way into my room without me knowing. I'm going to delete the program, the admin said, and a few keystrokes later, done. What the... As the admin deleted the program, thousands of windows began popping up on the screen of my laptop, all of them saying the same thing. Ollie, ollie, oxen free. After that, I threw my laptop in the trash and got a new one, as well as a new phone, SIM card and all. I was taking no chances. I got all new accounts for everything, and the admin told me he'd revoke Mr. Hide-and-Seek's membership personally. But, well, I'm going to disappear all the same. I have a plane ticket to somewhere, and my bags are already packed. Don't look for me. And if you ever start to feel like you're being watched, it's because you are. Well, I sincerely hoped you enjoyed those 7 stories this evening, and if you did, please do me a little tiny favor. Leave a 5-star review and write some nice words about the podcast. It really does make a huge difference to me. Well, that's enough for this evening, but I'll be back again, same time, same place, next week. Until then, sweet dreams and bye-bye.